A second wave of Iran energy shocks is about to hit Asia and the wider world. Why aren't markets reacting? May 14, 2026. Global oil inventories are nearing their lowest level in 8 years, with Goldman Sachs estimating stocks could fall to just 98 days of global demand by the end of May. Despite the tightening supply, oil prices have remained relatively stable. Brent crude is trading near $100 a barrel, down from April's peak of $126 after the Iran conflict, while West Texas Intermediate, WTI, has fallen from $113 to around $100. Analysts say markets remain surprisingly calm because investors believe the conflict and disruptions in the Middle East will eventually ease. According to Chen Qianming of Singapore's Nanyang Technological University, the oil market is facing a real shortage, but futures prices are being suppressed by hopes that the war will soon end. Analysts warn that if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed through June, oil prices could surge past $150 a barrel. Before the conflict, roughly 20 million barrels of oil moved through the strait daily. After nearly 70 days of disruption, the supply deficit may already exceed 1 billion barrels. Asia is considered especially vulnerable because most countries in the region depend heavily on imported Middle Eastern oil and natural gas. Economies across the region are highly industrialized and energy-intensive, making them more exposed to fuel shortages and rising electricity costs. Economists warn that prolonged disruption could push weaker Asian economies into recession while sharply increasing food and fuel prices. J.P. Morgan analysts noted that global oil inventories were relatively strong before the conflict, helping absorb some of the shock. However, only about 800 million barrels of the world's 8.4 billion barrels in storage are realistically available without creating operational stress. Governments have already released around 280 million barrels from reserves. Much of the remaining oil is trapped in pipelines, minimum storage requirements, or inaccessible facilities. Experts say the current crisis differs significantly from the 2022 Russia-Ukraine war. In that case, sanctions disrupted trade flows, but Russian oil still reached buyers elsewhere. The Iran conflict, by contrast, has caused an actual physical loss of supply for months, making the situation more severe. Despite falling inventories, the oil market remains backwardated, meaning future oil prices are lower than spot prices. Analysts at Wood Mackenzie say traders still expect Middle Eastern oil exports to resume by late May. Markets are also pricing in demand destruction, where high prices force consumers and businesses to permanently reduce energy use. Several Asian countries have already introduced energy-saving measures. The Philippines adopted a 4-day workweek after the conflict began. Thailand encouraged lighter clothing and higher air conditioning temperatures to reduce electricity use. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged citizens to cut overseas travel and work from home where possible. Wood Mackenzie expects global oil demand growth to turn negative this year. Rising production from non-OPEC countries such as Brazil, Guyana, and the United States could eventually help balance supply and demand in 2026. Economists warn that the longer the crisis lasts, the greater the risk of recession and financial instability in Asia. Historically, major oil disruptions have often triggered economic downturns. Higher fuel costs raise prices across the economy, reduce consumer spending, weaken government finances, and fuel inflation. Frontier economies in Southeast Asia, including Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, are considered especially vulnerable. Heavy oil imports could drain foreign exchange reserves and weaken investor confidence, potentially causing currency crises. The Indian rupee, Indonesian rupiah, and Philippine peso have already fallen to record lows during the conflict. Agriculture may also suffer as rising diesel and fertilizer costs discourage farmers from planting crops. Analysts warn this could create food shortages later in the year, particularly in poorer parts of Asia where farmers lack financial resources to absorb higher production costs. By Fortune story by Angelica on May 14, 2026.